Alright, all the judges ready? Time? Alright, let's begin. In the last speech, I'm going to be doing two things. First, I'm going to be starting out by showing you why the counter plan is essentially bad and why our plan is good, basically good versus evil here. So let's start out with the counter plan. Why is it not a good policy? The first is it violates something in debate theory. That is the theory of mutually exclusivity. In the debate world, in order for the negative team to successfully run a counter plan, they have to prove three things: they're non-topical, mutually exclusive, and competitive. We definitely agree with the competitiveness and the non-topicality, but they are definitely not mutually exclusive. Why is this true? Because the affirmative team's plan does not preclude a constitutional amendment being passed. Either that one day after our plan is passed or a year after our plan was passed, whatever the case may be, you can have both plans. You could have our plan implemented today, Congress denies itself the power to delegate anymore, and then tomorrow the people could pass a constitutional amendment giving that power back to Congress. That could happen. Our plan does not stop the negative team's counter plan from happening, and I'll be addressing a little more. The next the next reason it violates mutual exclusivity is in the real world. This is really where it comes down to the fundamentals of the Constitution. Under in the status quo, you have, like I explained in my 2AC, we have the Supreme Court making laws, we have the Congress making laws, the President making laws, and agencies like EPA making laws. Clearly, this is unconstitutional, but I'll be touching on that more later. What are we doing? Our plan simply brings all that power back into one group. The original group that was intended to have the power, Congress. The affirmative team, or the negative team, is trying to say that we cannot do that because we need to pass a constitutional amendment. This is actually not true. Our evidence that we read in our last 1AR, that they said supported, their side actually doesn't. It says the way Congress or the federal government increases its power is to pass a constitutional amendment. But what's happened in the status quo, Judge? There has been no constitutional amendment, yet the federal government has increased its power. This is an unconstitutional increase of their power to allow delegation. As we stated, it was simply the Supreme Court's rule that allowed the federal government to start delegating. There was no constitutional amendment. What our plan does is bring the federal government back under constitutional restraints. If the amendment was passed in the future, that would expound the federal government's power, thus allowing for delegation if the amendment was passed. Now let's move on down to my second reason why we should reject the counterplan. And it's basically, we have no idea what's going to happen. The affirmative negative team has proposed two constitutional amendments, each of which are mutually exclusive themselves. One to allow delegation, one not to allow delegation. We don't really know which one's going to be passed with the negative team's counterplan. We don't know if either of them will pass. In order for a constitutional amendment to pass, we have to have 3/4 of the states approve it. What if 3/4 of the states don't approve either constitutional amendment? Then that means the negative team's counterplan will not pass in the real world or in the debate world either. Because they have no fiat power over the state governments, we really don't know which one, if either, the states will choose. There is no solvency of the negative team's counterplan. Now let's move back down to the third point to why not to reject the affirmative negative team's counterplan. And their whole philosophy basically has been leave it to the people, let the people choose what's best. Now judges, we completely agree. The way we leave it to the people better than the negative team is we first correct the wrong that has been done. We put Congress back into the constitutional design of the original intent. We go back to my quote from James Madison. He said, the whole point of Article 1, Section 1 was to limit the excess of lawmaking. Today, we see delegation has allowed the federal government to practice excess of lawmaking, clearly violating the original intent of the Constitution. So we first correct the problem, and then, if later the people decide that Congress does in fact need the power to delegate, they can give the power to the federal government. The difference is, under the negative team's counterplan, you have the government taking the power from themselves versus under our plan. First, we limit the government, and then if the people want to give them this power, they can. So that's why we should reject the negative team's counterplan. Let's move up to why you want to affirm the resolution and vote for the affirmative team. The first is basically, you will know what is going to happen if you vote affirmative, unlike with the negative team's plan. There will be a clearly defined what is constitutional, what is unconstitutional in regards to federal power. Again, what are the two violations of the Constitution with delegation? The first is it violates Article 1, Section 1, which states all legislative power shall be vested in Congress. The second, it violates the separation of power principle. Again, we have every agency of the federal government making laws when it was originally intended to only be Congress. So let's move on now to the next point. This is really basically a sub-point. They stated that we do not have fiat power, and they said because we are using the Supreme Court. Now, they said under the Constitution, the Supreme Court isn't supposed to make laws. We completely agree. The Supreme Court isn't supposed to be making laws, but under the issue of resolution, we're supposed to be changing what the federal government is currently doing. And in the status quo, the Supreme Court is making laws. The Supreme Court has given itself the power to become a policy maker. We are changing that, judges. We are going back to what is constitutional. We're not supposed to be debating what's constitutional. The resolution tells us to change the federal government's environmental policy, and the current current environmental policy is for the Supreme Court and the President and Congress to be policymakers. We changed that. We do have veto power. We will bring about all 4 justifications that we claim in our 1AC, and we will bring liberty back to the people. Thank you.